The young woman entered the music hall quietly, her shoes making soft sounds against the polished wooden floor. She had been coming to this place for months, almost every day, helping with cleaning, setting up chairs, and arranging sheet music. No one noticed her much. She had no fame, no bright clothes, no loud voice. She was just another person in the background, doing the work no one else wanted to do. But she loved the piano more than anything, and every time she touched it, she felt a small part of herself come alive. Today was no different from other days, or at least it should have been. She had a small notebook under her arm, full of little pieces she had written herself. The pages were messy, filled with scribbles, crossed-out notes, and ideas that only she understood. She had never played for anyone before. She never had the chance. She knew she was not ready to be famous, and she had no desire for attention, just wanted to play. The hall was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of polished wood and dust from the old curtains. Chairs were arranged neatly in rows, waiting for an audience that had not yet arrived. At the front, the grand piano gleamed under a soft spotlight. It looked majestic and intimidating, the kind of instrument that could make a person feel small just by being near it. She paused for a moment, letting her fingers brush over the keys. Oh, they were smooth and cold, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. She had dreamed of this moment many times, but now that she was here, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. A man with a clipboard appeared, walking quickly across the hall. He was one of the organizers, a man with a strict face and a sharp tone. He glanced at her and raised an eyebrow. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands were slightly trembling. "Yes," she said softly. He looked at her doubtfully. "Remember, just something simple. Keep it slow. Keep it safe. The audience is not here for anything fancy. Just play what we planned." She swallowed, understanding exactly what he meant. Wanted her to be invisible, to play like she had no imagination, no soul. She was supposed to follow a sheet of music, play every note exactly as written, and not step outside the lines. She could feel the weight of the expectation to be small, safe, forgettable. She nodded again, and he walked away satisfied. She sat down on the bench, her fingers hovering above the keys. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous fluttering in her chest. For a moment she closed her eyes and remembered the countless hours she had spent alone in small rooms, playing music nobody heard. She remembered the joy of creating, the thrill of improvising, the way the notes could feel like a conversation with herself. This was a moment she had dreamed of, and yet she was being asked to shrink it. To make it plain and ordinary, she opened her eyes and began to play. At first, she followed the instructions exactly. The notes were simple, slow, predictable. Her fingers moved with care, each sound quiet and careful, as though testing the space around her. The room felt still, almost holding its breath. She could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. It was not her music. It was someone else's idea of music, someone else's rules. But then something shifted. She felt a small tug in her chest, a reminder of who she really was. Her fingers, almost without thinking, began to move differently. She added a small twist to the rhythm, a subtle change in the timing. Started to dance lightly, like water flowing around rocks. It was still gentle, still soft, but it carried a little spark, a little life. The sound caught her attention. She looked around, but the hall was empty, save for the man with the clipboard who was returning to check on her. He frowned slightly, noticing the change, but he didn't say anything. She kept playing, feeling the music grow stronger inside her. She experimented carefully, testing small variations, watching the way each note resonated in the room. The piano began to sing in a way it had never done when she followed instructions. It felt alive, and she felt alive through it. Her mind wandered to the times she had been told she was too young, too inexperienced, too small to make anything remarkable. She remembered teachers who dismissed her ideas, classmates who laughed at her attempts to create something different, and moments when she had doubted herself completely. And yet here she was, at a grand piano in a music hall, with the freedom to let herself be heard, if only in a small way. She felt a mix of fear and courage, the two emotions intertwined like twin vines, slowly. The simple melody she had started with began to stretch. She added new chords, small improvisations, a delicate swing of rhythm. Each note carried a little of her own story, a little of her own heart. The sound filled the hall, moving softly through the rows of empty chairs. She could imagine the music, traveling into the minds of those who would eventually sit there, capturing attention in a way that was quiet but undeniable. She was no longer just playing, she was speaking through the piano. The man with the clipboard returned, his footsteps hesitant. He leaned slightly against a wall, listening, did not interrupt. He did not demand that she stop. Her playing had caught him off guard, something unexpected. Her music had started small and safe, but it had grown, blossomed in a way that was both gentle and compelling. She could feel the change in herself, the way her confidence was slowly building. She was no longer just the assistant, the helper, the background figure. She was a musician, creator. Her fingers moved faster now, but still with care. She experimented with soft and loud, with pauses and surprises. Each change was a small rebellion against the expectation to be ordinary. She allowed herself to take risks, knowing that nobody could tell her she was wrong because there were no rules for what she was feeling. The music was hers, entirely hers, a reflection of years of quiet practice, of secret dreams, of emotions that had nowhere else to go. The light in the hall seemed to glow a little warmer, or perhaps it was just her imagination. She lost track of time, lost track of herself in the flow of sound. She was no longer thinking about what she had been told to play, or whether she would be noticed. She was simply living in the music, letting it carry her forward. The notes moved like a conversation between her heart and the piano, each one a sentence, each chord a phrase that expressed something words could not. Outside the hall, a few people were beginning to arrive for the session. They were unaware of the quiet miracle unfolding inside. Chairs clicked as they were pulled into place. Conversations drifted softly from one side of the hall to another. And still, she played, her music reaching them before they even saw her, stirring something they could not yet name. The sound was gentle, but it was persistent, refusing to be ignored. She paused for a moment, catching her breath. Her hands hovered above the keys, her heart racing, her mind alive with possibility. She looked around, suddenly aware that the empty hall was no longer empty in spirit. The music had filled it, had created a presence, a life of its own. She smiled faintly, realizing that this was what she had been waiting for, though she had not known it. Not fame, not applause, not recognitions, just this moment. This connection between her and the piano, this release of everything she had kept inside. Then quietly, she began again. Each note carried more confidence, more assurance, more of herself. She was exploring, discovering, inventing. The simple instructions had become a springboard for something far greater than anyone could have expected. She felt the music stretching, bending, growing into something richer, more layered, more alive. And in that moment, she understood that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer just following orders. She was creating, truly and freely. The hours seemed to pass unnoticed. Every sound she made added to the atmosphere, building a story that only she could tell. She did not rush, she did not force, she simply let the music flow as it wished. Each chord, each pause, each gentle trill was a reflection of her experience, her emotion, her soul. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet pride that had nothing to do with being seen or praised. This was hers, completely and beautifully hers. Finally, she allowed the last note to linger, hanging in the air like a breath. The hall was still again, but it was no longer the same. The music had changed it, and it had changed her. Back, her hands resting on her lap, her heart still racing. Her mind awash with the feeling of having done something impossible and yet perfectly natural. She had started with a simple task, a simple melody, and had turned it into a beginning of something extraordinary. And for the first time in her life, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was capable of far more than anyone had ever expected. The audience started arriving, slowly filling the seats in the small music hall. They chattered quietly among themselves, unaware that something unusual was already unfolding at the front of the room. The young woman remained at the piano, her eyes focused on the keys, but her mind was alive with every sound she had just created. She could feel the echo of each note bouncing in the empty corners of the hall, as if the room itself had taken in the music and was now holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. A few people glanced toward the front as they walked in, curious about the young woman who was sitting at the grand piano. She looked ordinary, almost invisible to anyone who did not pay attention. Yet there was something in her posture, in the way she held her hands above the keys, that hinted at something more. The first note she played caught the attention of those closest, soft but confident, almost like an invitation. The audience began to settle in, still unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Her fingers moved lightly across the keys, continuing the subtle jazz rhythm that had begun the day before. Each note was carefully chosen, not from any sheet of music, but from the ideas and emotions that had lived in her heart for years. She felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. It was strange to play in front of people, even a small crowd, and yet she did not feel fear. She only felt the music, and in that feeling, strange kind of courage was growing. As the first few rows listened, their heads slowly began to tilt in surprise. The melody she had started with had been simple, familiar, expected. But now it was changing, becoming richer, more complex, and entirely unexpected. Each chord was layered, moving in ways that seemed to breathe and expand. She added pauses where silence became part of the music, letting the sound resonate and fill the space. It was subtle, yet it commanded attention. A man in the second row, teacher from the local music school, leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed. He had seen many students perform, and he could recognize skill and creativity almost instantly. He did not yet know the young woman's name, but her playing made him stop and listen. Something about her timing, the way she intertwined softness with small bursts of complexity, spoke of talent that went beyond ordinary instruction. She was not just playing music. She was telling a story, though the story was entirely her own. The young woman noticed the shift in the room. She could feel the energy of the audience changing, a quiet curiosity replacing the polite, inattentive chatter of people settling into their seats. Yet she did not allow herself to look up. She kept her gaze on the piano keys, trusting that her fingers knew what to do. She felt a rhythm building inside her, a rhythm that seemed to grow naturally from the conversation between her heart and the instrument. It was as if the piano itself was alive, guiding her, and she had only to follow. She continued to play, allowing herself to stretch the melody further. Small improvisations emerged, unexpected variations that brought warmth and movement to the music. A gentle swing in the left hand, a fleeting chord in the right, soft trills and grace notes that made the sound sparkle. The audience was quietly captivated now, leaning forward in their seats, drawn in by the magic that was unfolding before them. Some closed their eyes, letting the music speak directly to their emotions. Others glanced around, amazed that the young woman at the piano could command the room so quietly. Without any performance theatrics, without any showy gestures, the man with the clipboard, who had been watching from the side, returned. His expression was difficult to read, a mixture of concern and surprise. He had instructed her to play something simple, to avoid anything too complicated. But now he could see that she had created something entirely her own, something that he could not control. His eyes followed her hands as they moved effortlessly across the keys, each finger contributing to the unfolding soundscape. He frowned slightly, but there was also a hint of admiration. He did not interrupt. He knew better than to try. The young woman felt a thrill of excitement, but it was tempered by a calm focus. She was aware of the room, aware of the people listening, but she was not performing for them. She was playing for herself, for the music, for the story she had carried silently for so long. Each note became a sentence, each phrase a paragraph, building a narrative that was gentle but powerful. She could feel the emotions flowing through her, unspoken, yet entirely clear in the way her fingers pressed the keys, in the way the chords moved through the room in the back of the hall. An older woman leaned on her cane, listening intently. She had been attending music sessions for decades, and she thought she had heard everything. Yet there was something fresh, something entirely unexpected in the young woman's playing. The way she balanced simplicity with complexity, the way she allowed the music to breathe, was rare. The older woman felt a warmth rise in her chest, a recognition of talent that could not be ignored. A reminder of why she had loved music all her life. The melody continued to grow, spiraling gently into improvisation. Each variation was a surprise, yet it felt natural, as if the music had always been meant to evolve in this way. She added soft pauses, letting the silence speak between notes. The hall seemed to hold its breath in those moments, the empty spaces echoing with the anticipation of what would come next. Even the man with the clipboard could not look away. He had been trained to enforce rules and instructions, but now he was witness to something beyond rules, beyond expectation. He could feel it in the vibrations of the piano, in the hush of the audience. The young woman's confidence was growing. She was no longer the assistant, the quiet helper in the background. She was the creator, the storyteller, the one shaping sound into something alive. Each chord was deliberate, each melody carefully improvised yet full of emotion. She could feel the room responding, the attention of the audience lifting her, pushing her to explore further. And yet, there was no fear, no need to impress. She was simply playing, simply expressing herself through the instrument that had been her companion for so long. Small smiles appeared in the audience. Gentle nods, subtle expressions of appreciation. They did not yet know the full scope of what she could do, but they were drawn in, captivated by the honesty and depth of her music. Her fingers moved faster now, but with a careful precision, weaving rhythms and melodies together in ways that felt effortless. She could feel the pulse of the hall matching the rhythm she was creating. The shared energy of performer and listener intertwining in quiet harmony. Time seemed to stretch. The music became more expressive, more daring. She allowed herself to experiment with dynamics, moving from soft, delicate passages to fuller, more resonant sounds. She explored minor chords and gentle dissonances, letting tension and resolution flow naturally. The audience responded, though silently, with an unspoken recognition of the skill, emotion, and creativity unfolding before them. The hall was no longer empty. It was alive with the presence of music, filled with a shared experience that transcended words. The man in the second row leaned closer, his face showing a mixture of disbelief and admiration. He had seen countless performers in his life, but few had the ability to transform a simple instruction into something so rich and alive. He wondered how someone so young and seemingly ordinary could possess such depth and instinct. The young woman did not notice him or anyone else. She was fully absorbed in the piano, fully present in the music. And yet, her presence was impossible to ignore. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The young woman was aware of nothing but the keys under her fingers and the sound flowing from them. Each note carried a memory, a feeling, a thought that could not be expressed in words. She was telling a story that was entirely her own, a narrative woven from years of hidden practice, quiet longing, and unspoken dreams. The piano was her voice, and through it, she spoke more clearly than she ever had before. Eventually, she allowed the final notes to linger, soft and gentle, fading slowly into silence. The room held its breath for a moment, caught in the echo of what had just been created. Then, quietly, almost instinctively, the audience began to clap. It started softly, then grew, until the room was filled with applause. Some stood, moved by the unexpected brilliance of what they had just heard. Others remained seated, but their eyes were wide with recognition and wonder. The young woman looked up, her heart racing, her mind still immersed in the music. And she allowed herself the faintest smile. The man with the clipboard approached, still unsure how to react. He had intended to control the session to ensure that everything went according to plan. And yet he had been powerless in the face of the young woman's creativity. There was a respect in his eyes now, a recognition of talent that could not be dismissed. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, acknowledging what she had done without saying a word. She did not need praise. The music itself had spoken, and that was enough. People in the audience began to discuss quietly among themselves, asking who she was, where she had learned to play, how she had created something so moving from such simple instructions. They were drawn in by the honesty of her performance, by the skill and depth she had revealed. And through it all, she remained focused, quietly proud, but calm. Knowing that this was only the beginning of what she could do, the music hall, once quiet and empty, now seemed transformed. It was no longer just a place for chairs and echoes. It had become a space alive with sound and emotion. A place where something extraordinary had happened because someone had dared to follow her own voice. And the young woman sitting at the piano understood for the first time that she could never truly play small again. She had touched something larger than herself, and the experience would never leave her. She had begun to step into the world she had always imagined, one note at a time. The young woman remained at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys as she absorbed the lingering energy of the applause. She had never felt anything quite like it. For years, she had played in empty rooms, in the shadows, unseen and unheard. And now, for the first time, her music had reached people. It touched them in a way that she had only imagined in her dreams. She felt a mixture of awe and humility, knowing that this was a beginning, not an end, and that the journey ahead was both exciting and unknown. The audience began to settle back into their seats, still whispering among themselves, still captivated by the performance they had witnessed. The older woman with the cane was leaning slightly forward, her eyes bright with emotion, as if she had been transported to a different time in her life. The teacher in the second row had a thoughtful expression, replaying the sequence of chords and rhythms in his mind, trying to understand how someone so young could create such depth and nuance without any formal display of technique. Even the man with the clipboard was silent, watching quietly, perhaps realizing that instructions could not contain the artistry that had unfolded before him. Taking a deep breath, the young woman began to play again. This time, she felt a new energy coursing through her. The first performance had been tentative in many ways, a bridge between following instructions and embracing her own voice. Now, she allowed herself to explore further, to stretch the melody into shapes she had never dared to try before. Each note became a question, each phrase a gentle experiment, testing the boundaries of her own creativity. She did not care about mistakes or judgment. She played because it was the only way she could express herself fully. Her music began to take on a richer, more complex texture. She introduced subtle harmonies, layering notes in ways that created movement and depth. She explored the softer tones of the piano, allowing them to whisper against the louder, bolder chords. She experimented with rhythm, creating unexpected pauses and gentle swings that gave the piece a lively, almost conversational quality. She could feel the energy of the room responding to her, though she did not glance at the audience. She was fully immersed, and the piano was her voice. A young man near the front, holding a small notebook, scribbled quickly, capturing moments of the performance with excitement. He had come to learn, to study, and he recognized brilliance when he saw it. He noticed the way she shifted between softness and intensity, how the music seemed to breathe and pulse with a life of its own. It was inspiring, not just in technical skill, but in the honesty and emotion she conveyed. He looked around at the other audience members and saw their reactions mirrored in their faces, a shared acknowledgement of something rare and precious. The young woman's fingers danced across the keys, moving faster now, yet never losing control. She let herself be carried by the rhythm, allowing improvisation to guide her rather than strict adherence to any plan. She felt connected to every sound, every chord, as if the piano itself were a living companion, responding to her thoughts and emotions. She could feel the narrative of the piece unfolding naturally. The rise and fall of tension, the interplay between expectation and surprise. It was as if the music were telling a story she had kept inside for years, a story that now had the freedom to emerge. The hall, once quiet and still, seemed to resonate with her music. Each note lingered in the air, bouncing softly against the walls, weaving a tapestry of sound that enveloped the audience. People leaned forward instinctively, drawn into the unfolding performance. Some closed their eyes, allowing the music to speak directly to their hearts. Others watched closely, amazed at the subtle interplay of technique and emotion. The young woman felt the shared energy of the room without acknowledging it directly. She was aware of it, yet she remained focused on the piano. Letting the connection happen naturally, she introduced new variations, playful yet deliberate. Exploring textures and timbres she had only ever imagined in quiet solitude. The melody twisted gently, each chord offering a surprise, each phrase a gentle revelation. She felt exhilaration and calm at the same time, the duality of creation and discovery unfolding beneath her fingers. This was more than playing. It was storytelling, emotion, and expression intertwined. Each note was a word, each chord a sentence, and the piece was becoming a full narrative. It could speak to anyone willing to listen. The man in the second row watched with growing admiration. He realized that she was not just performing. She was creating in real time, drawing from her own emotions and experiences. There was no script, no predetermined path, only the purity of expression and the honesty of the performance. He felt privileged to witness it. A rare and moving demonstration of what music could achieve when it was allowed to breathe freely. He leaned slightly closer, careful not to disrupt the quiet intimacy that had formed between the young woman and the piano. The young woman felt her confidence grow with every passing minute. She had begun cautiously testing the boundaries of her own abilities, and now she was fully immersed in the flow of creation. Her hands moved fluidly, almost instinctively, guided by intuition and years of secret practice. She felt a deep connection to the piano, a sense of partnership that allowed her to explore sounds she had only imagined. She played not to impress, not to follow instructions, but simply because it was the only way to communicate the stories inside. Her audience members began to notice the subtle transitions in tone and mood. The music was no longer just sound. It had become a living presence, a reflection of the young woman's inner world. She moved from gentle passages that evoked calm reflection to bold, spirited sections that conveyed excitement and energy. She layered dynamics and texture, creating an intricate balance between simplicity and complexity. The audience responded instinctively, drawn into the narrative. Experiencing the story in real time through the subtle language of music, a woman near the back held her hand to her chest. Visibly moved by the emotion conveyed in the music, she had been attending performances for decades and thought she had seen every possible variation, every imaginable expression. Yet here in this modest hall, she encountered something that transcended technical skill or instruction. It was honesty, creativity, and courage, wrapped together in sound. The young woman had taken a simple directive and transformed it into a living, breathing masterpiece that reached far beyond the piano keys. The young woman's mind was alive with ideas, each one flowing seamlessly into the next. She experimented with timing, stretching some notes and shortening others, creating a gentle tension and release that added depth and nuance. She explored the contrast between high and low tones, letting the piano speak in a rich, full voice. She introduced delicate trills and unexpected pauses, small surprises that kept the audience engaged without overwhelming them. Each variation felt natural, product of intuition and experience rather than conscious calculation. The applause after her first section had been a surprise, but now it fueled her energy. She felt a quiet thrill, a recognition that her music was not just heard but felt. She did not need validation, yet the response reminded her that she was capable of sharing something meaningful with the world. She continued to play, letting the audience become part of the experience, even though she did not interact with them directly. The music itself was the conversation. It was enough. The man with the clipboard had taken a step back, no longer attempting to manage or control the session. He realized that whatever he had planned was irrelevant in the face of what the young woman was creating. Her performance was a reminder that art could not be constrained by expectation or instruction. He felt a mixture of respect and humility, witnessing the emergence of a talent that could not be directed. Only observed and appreciated, the young woman's fingers moved with increasing confidence. Exploring passages that were challenging yet rewarding, she introduced subtle rhythmic shifts, playful syncopations, and harmonic variations that brought the piece to life in unexpected ways. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from external approval, but from the act of creation itself. Each note was a choice, a reflection of her inner voice, a step toward realizing the full potential of her abilities. The audience was captivated, absorbed in the unfolding musical journey. They were experiencing something rare and personal, a performance that was intimate despite the public setting. The young woman had managed to take a simple instruction to play something easy and safe, and transform it into a story that resonated deeply with every listener. The hall seemed to pulse with the energy of the music, each note reverberating through the space, leaving an impression that would linger long after the last sound faded as the performance continued. She felt a sense of flow, a seamless connection between thought, emotion, and action. The music was alive, moving through her and into the room, creating a shared experience that transcended words. She experimented with silence as much as sound, letting pauses become part of the narrative, allowing the audience to absorb and reflect on the music. She felt exhilaration, calm, and clarity all at once, a rare combination that made the moment unforgettable. The young woman's story through music was becoming more than just notes on a page. It was a reflection of years of quiet practice, hidden creativity, and emotional exploration. She was telling a story that no one else could tell, using the piano as a bridge between her inner world and the audience. Each chord, each pause, each variation was a step toward something larger, something entirely her own. She had crossed a threshold, moving from cautious exploration to confident creation. And the hall was witness to this transformation. Finally, after what felt like both moments and hours, she brought the piece to a gentle close. The last chord lingered, vibrating softly in the space, as if reluctant to leave. Silence followed, a hush that held the audience in anticipation. Honoring the Jatha, young woman remained seated at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, breathing in the quiet that followed the applause. Her heart was racing, but it was a calm, deep excitement, feeling that she had finally stepped into a place she had always dreamed of. For years, she had practiced alone, hidden away in rooms where nobody could hear her. Now, she had shared her music with people who listened, who felt it, who recognized the story she had woven through sound. It was an extraordinary moment, and she savored it quietly, letting it sink into her being. The audience was still clapping, some standing, some leaning forward, all expressing the amazement that had settled over the room. Whispers and murmurs filled the air as people exchanged glances, clearly discussing what they had just heard. A few audience members had tears in their eyes, others were smiling with wonder, and a couple seemed to be holding their breath, afraid that speaking might break the magic. The hall was alive, vibrant with the energy of shared emotion. Yet it remained calm, a gentle reverence that matched the beauty of the music. The man with the clipboard approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He had been the one to instruct her to play something simple, something safe, something forgettable. And yet, what she had done exceeded everything he had expected. He had witnessed creativity unfettered, talent that had taken a simple instruction and transformed it into something living and unforgettable. He stood beside her for a moment, watching her breathe, her small smile, her fingers lightly touching the keys. He did not speak. There was nothing to say. What she had created could not be measured by words or rules. She took a deep breath and began to play again. This time, the music was more intimate, more delicate, as if she were speaking directly to each listener individually. She explored softer tones, gentle transitions, subtle variations that drew the audience in closer. The energy in the hall shifted again, from astonishment to quiet reflection. People listened with intent, allowing themselves to feel the emotions conveyed through each note. The music seemed to wrap around them, carrying them into a world shaped entirely by sound. A world that existed only for the moment and for those willing to be present. Her fingers moved with confidence now, guided by years of hidden practice and an intuitive understanding of the piano. She played with a natural rhythm, creating patterns that were both intricate and fluid. She explored chords and unexpected combinations, moving from major to minor, from light to dark. Each transition telling a story without a single word. She added small improvisations, delicate trills, and subtle accents that made the music sparkle and breathe. The piece was alive, shifting and evolving in response to her own thoughts and emotions. And the audience responded unconsciously, their attention drawn deeper into the experience. A young man in the front row leaned forward, his notebook open, scribbling notes and observations as he listened. He was a music student, someone who had studied technique and theory for years, and yet he was captivated by the honesty and creativity of her playing. He realized that her music could not be replicated, could not be measured against formulas or rules. It was personal, unique, and profoundly moving. He glanced at other members of the audience, noting their reactions, the quiet awe, the wide eyes, the small smiles, the moments of quiet tears. It was a rare experience, and he felt fortunate to witness it. The young woman continued, her music evolving naturally. She allowed pauses to stretch, creating tension and release, letting the audience feel the ebb and flow of emotion. She moved between light, airy passages and fuller, resonant chords, exploring the range of the piano with a sense of freedom and control. The hall responded to her, the sound bouncing softly off the walls, creating a warm resonance that seemed to envelop every listener. Each note was deliberate, yet effortless, a balance of skill, intuition, and emotion that kept the audience fully engaged. The older woman with the cane watched quietly, her eyes glistening. She had attended countless performances in her life, but she had never experienced anything like this. There was a purity in the music, a sincerity that went beyond technical skill or performance standards. It was a reflection of the young woman herself, her experiences, her emotions, her imagination. The music was living proof that creativity could not be confined, that it could emerge from even the simplest instructions and take flight in ways that astonished and inspired. The man in the second row. The teacher observed the technical mastery behind the improvisation. He recognized the subtle shifts in harmony, the use of dynamics, the phrasing that carried emotional weight. Yet he also recognized that this was not about technique alone. It was about connection, about the ability to communicate through sound in a way that touched hearts. He leaned slightly forward, captivated, as he realized that this young woman had discovered her voice, had allowed her inner world to speak through the piano, and had invited everyone in the hall to listen and feel along with her. The young woman felt the music expand within her. She experimented with different motifs, weaving them together, exploring contrasts, and building layers of sound that created a rich, immersive experience. She allowed herself to take risks, moving beyond what she had ever tried before. Trusting her instincts and her years of quiet study, she felt the flow of the piece guiding her, each variation a step forward, each chord a sentence in the story she was telling. The audience followed her journey, experiencing each twist and turn, each rise and fall, without needing to understand the technical details, only the emotion and the narrative. Soft murmurs of appreciation rose occasionally from the audience, but mostly they were silent, captivated, almost holding their breath. Every listener was experiencing the music personally, connecting with it in their own way. Some closed their eyes to focus on the sound, some tilted their heads to catch the subtle harmonies, and some simply sat in awe, absorbing the beauty of what was unfolding. The young woman did not need to speak. The music itself was the message. It was enough. The man with the clipboard moved slightly closer again, this time with a small nod of acknowledgement. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something that could not be planned or predicted. He realized that the young woman's talent, creativity, and courage had transformed a simple instruction into an experience that resonated deeply with everyone in the room. He felt a quiet admiration, a recognition that sometimes the greatest art emerges from freedom and self-expression rather than rigid expectation. Her confidence continued to grow. She was no longer the quiet assistant, the background figure. She was a creator, a storyteller, an artist in the truest sense. The piano became an extension of herself, each note a reflection of her emotions and thoughts. She explored themes of joy, longing, curiosity, and wonder, allowing them to flow naturally from her mind to her fingers, from the keys to the ears and hearts of the audience. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she was sharing a part of herself that had remained hidden for so long. As the music progressed, she allowed more space for expression. She varied the tempo, shifting from slow, reflective passages to lively, animated sections that brought energy and excitement to the room. She introduced small, unexpected turns in the melody, moments of surprise that made the audience lean in closer. fully engaged with the unfolding performance. She felt a deep satisfaction, not from applause or recognition, but from the act of creating something beautiful and meaningful that resonated with others. The audience was fully immersed now, following every nuance, every subtle change. They were experiencing something rare and authentic, a performance that spoke directly to their emotions without the need for explanation. The young woman's music had created a shared space, a connection that transcended words, where every listener could feel the intention, creativity, and the heart behind each note. She felt the presence of every person in the room, not as a distraction, but as part of the energy that flowed through her playing, enhancing the experience for both herself and the audience. The young woman allowed the piece to evolve naturally, exploring new themes, revisiting earlier motifs, and creating a sense of continuity and progression. She introduced delicate, shimmering runs of notes, soft harmonies that added depth, and subtle dynamic shifts that brought the music to life. She felt a sense of joy and wonder, a playful curiosity that allowed her to explore the piano in ways she had never attempted before. The audience responded intuitively, their emotions shifting with the music, drawn deeper into the story she was telling.